Here in episode 4 of Circuit Spotlight, we're talking about a circuit which is, again, from a different series from Gran Turismo. In fact, this has been featured in a bunch of different racing games, and most recently for me, I've been driving here, or riding here a lot, in Ride 4 in particular. And the reason why I chose this circuit to be a bit different to the theme which we've gone with so far, with Midfield, Maple Valley, Grand Valley, and whatever comes up next, is because typically for me, my feelings on a racing circuit are either indifferent or positive. There are very few occasions where I can think of tracks that I actively don't like. And as much of a hot take as it seems to be to say this, not only do I not like Virginia International Raceway, I actively hate this circuit. In fact, I hate every single version of this circuit in every single race I've driven on it. It was introduced in Forza 6, also in Forza 7. I don't recall off the top of my head if it was in Motorsport as well, but it may well be. Of course, you could correct me down below. It's also in R Factor 2, iRacing, Automobilista, Supercar Challenge, Ferrari Challenge, of course the Ride series, and it's even available as a mod in the AC series as well. So it's got some pretty good coverage, and if you think that's good coverage, it's way bigger in terms of coverage and inclusion in real-world racing events, from karting, even NASCAR uses it as a testing circuit. There's been LMP events, GT3 events, Porsche Challenge, Ferrari Challenge, Moto America, Trans Am, IMSA, basically all forms of racing aside from maybe monster trucks. And in terms of the history of the track, it's quite an interesting one. It was originally, I believe, built by like a couple of guys on a bulldozer, which I guess is probably the case for a lot of older circuits, but it was initially opened in 1957, and on its inaugural weekend, none other than Carroll Shelby won the first event there over the weekend in a Maserati no less. And not just Carroll Shelby, but plenty of well-known names and even famous celebrities have driven here. Now the interesting thing is, it was opened, as I said, in 1957, but then it was closed in 1974. It then went quite some time before opening again in the year 2000 with more of a, you could say, I guess, the Ascari race resort kind of approach, wherein it's more of a country club event. You would pay to have admission, and then you have like tickets thrown in as well for multiple events throughout the year. And where things get interesting about all of these variations is that the full course, which is a 3.3 mile 17 turn circuit, that's 5.3 kilometers, has been around since its inception. The other 5 variations though, which are the Grand East, Grand West, North, South, and Patriot, were all introduced on or around the year 2000 or 2003. And to briefly run through those variations, the Grand East circuit has 25 turns, the Grand West circuit is shorter but has more turns, 4.1 miles but 28 corners, the North circuit is only 2.2 miles with 17 turns, the South circuit is 1.65 miles with 12 turns, and then the smallest variation, funnily enough though also with 12 turns, is the Patriot course at 1.1 miles or 1.8 kilometers. So there's a huge amount of variation for those who do love the track, and incidentally its all-time record was set in 2012 by none other than an Acura LMP car, which was a 1 minute 36.1 on that original 3.3 mile full course. And as an interesting little tidbit of information on the side, it's based in Alton, which is about half a mile away from the North Carolina border, and in terms of why I don't like this track, it probably seems a bit harsh to go that far, because a lot of people really do, and I can see why. The track does have a lot of things which, under normal circumstances, really would appeal to me. It has almost like a Gran Turismo 3 complex string kind of vibe, with that very flat, wide open, narrow road and a lot of grass kind of approach. Of course, the biggest difference being that this is a real circuit, whereas complex string isn't, and also the lap does take a bit longer, up around 2 minutes or so in some of its longer variations, and even though 2 minutes doesn't sound like much, it's a very intense 2 minutes. There are very few real long straight sections here, and most of it is really technical, what appears to be high flow corners, where you can tuck in and flow from corner to corner on a bike, even more so in a car. But here's the problem. The issues which I take with this track are 2 things in particular. Number 1, it manages to somehow be very flat, but really blind and hilly at the same time. Like, the track feels really flat, as I said, like a complex string, for example, or a Sebring, but it actually really isn't. There are a number of blind crests, usually followed by sharp hairpin bends, and if you just overcook it, especially in a bike, you're straight off the track. Of course, you can always say, well, it's a skill issue. Sure, but this is where it brings me to the second thing. See, I love challenging tracks, and of course this part of the video is purely subjective to me. My favourite track of all time is the Nordschleife. My second favourite track is Lasat. I really love tracks that demand your attention, and as you can tell, I like a good long lap. I really love that. But to me that's where the difference comes in, and this will absolutely not be the same for everyone, clearly, but I love a track where you feel rewarded by the challenge. When you finish a good lap of the Nordschleife, you feel like you've accomplished something, and it was fun. You really, more often than not, enjoyed it, for many of us at least. The difference, for me at least, here at Virginia, as you'll see part of the footage here in the video with the Yamaha R1 endurance racing bike, is that despite smashing the gold time by like 5 seconds, which you'd usually be happy about, I didn't feel accomplished. I didn't feel happy that I'd completed it. I just felt glad that it was out of the way. And it's just a really tiresome track. I think that's the way I would describe it. Again, I'm sure there are plenty of people who will say, well, skill issue, you don't race here enough, you're just not used to it, whatever the case may be. I just don't really like the track. I don't find it to have much character. It feels very much to me like a test course, which is kind of what it is a lot of the time, and as such, it doesn't have too much personality, in my opinion. A lot of wide open spaces, not really much going on visually. Somehow, as I said, manages to feel flat and hilly and blind, with crests and flat roads all at the same time, and you could argue as well that that's a good mix of things, so like I said, it can go back and forth all day long on personal preference. The thing which is not in question, though, is that this track is massively popular, so as with some of my takes, clearly I'm an outlier here in not liking the circuit. In terms of the favourite corner, of course that is something which we always talk about. I will of course put the map up on screen so that you can do a bit of a cross-reference, maybe from your own experience here. I'm sure that many will have their own favourite section or favourite corner. Particularly on a motorcycle, I find this to be a very start-stop track. And again, that's with winning events, getting golds. It doesn't matter. Clearly I'm quick enough here. It's not a case of that. It's just the flow doesn't flow to me. So I'd love to hear down below if you are a fan of the course. I'm sure many of you are. Next time around we will be back to the world of Gran Turismo with each of the odd numbered episodes. And of course I cannot forget to list my own favourite turn on the track, which is probably the turn that takes you back out to the main menu.